Good evening and welcome to our AI prompt along session with Jamie today. It is clear from the announcement of an additional 1.2 billion in spending review allocation to the Department of Science and Technology that the government means business when it comes to technology investment. Government's looking to rely heavily on technology to unlock its planned cuts to administrative costs. And so embracing innovation is expected to be vital to ensuring that public finances are managed effectively and equitably, and for meeting some of the cost pressures in modern public finance. And this is why CIPF has introduced its Technology in Focus series. The Tech in Focus series is designed to, if you like, be that bridge for our professionals to help us get ahead of the skill sets that we will need in this new world of technology. And so for today, we will be joined by Jamie, who will take us through our prompt along session today. Jamie has over 2 decades of experience advising boards and executives in audit, in finance, and risk and control. And he's recently launched, I say recently, over a year ago now, he's founded Block.ai to turn big ideas into working solutions using the best of digital and data. And this is all in a bid to solve real problems, whether in the public or private sector. Welcome, Jamie, and it's over to you now.
Thanks very much. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody else okay. Let me share my screen, and then we'll get started. You all right too?
Yes.
We can do that. Excellent. Share. There we go. So, as was said earlier, nice to meet everybody. I'm Jamie Crossman-Smith. I actually started my career in the Audit Commission nearly 20 years ago, so I know CIPFA quite well. Pleased to say I failed my very first exam, but then I subsequently went and passed it. So I found accountancy probably the hardest thing I've ever done, actually, surprisingly enough, in my life. I've done lots of things since. I've worked for Deloitte, Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, through Grant Thornton. And I recently left Grant Thornton, where I was managing director of their Digital Data and Technology Centre of Excellence. I've done lots of things. I'm author of the 9 for Auditors ebook, and I led the Joint Industry and Government Research Programme to assess the cyber risks arising to AI for the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, and I lecture for my sins on a handful of MSAI AI programmes. So today what I'd like to talk you through is, firstly, what is AI? Because there's a lot of confusion out there. And then secondly, start to open the box of tricks that you can use to get the most out of AI. And we can have and if you've got a large language model of choice like ChatGPT or Claude, feel free to go along, to prompt along as we go, so you can start to see the responses that you get and how we can improve them for you to get better outputs. So what is AI? Well, it confuses a lot of people to hear that, actually, you know what, this is nothing new. The very first neural networks, the backbone of the large language models we know and love today, were first hypothesized in 1943. The first perceptron, which was the first building of one of those models, was actually 1957. So, you know, my father was born in 1953, so we're not too far off there. 1980, which I don't remember, but I was around the time I was born. 1984, the very first self-driving car came out. Now, it wasn't like the Teslas and the Waymos we see today. It was something you couldn't really fit in properly. It was like a truck full of computers and racks of servers, etc. But it worked, right? So when we talk about AI, a lot of this is quite old, established, well understood technology. 2 things happened though. You'll see in 1986, there was a technique called backpropagation that was invented, which was the ability to allow models to learn from data and examples, which has made the difference today. And then in 2017, the transformer model, which is the actual neural network that large language models are powered off, came about in 2017, surprisingly created by Google, who have maybe fallen a little bit behind in the race, but there we go. And then it's up for discussion, if anybody's heard of the Turing test, that in 2025, this year, there's some experts have said that maybe ChatGPT has passed the Turing test, i.e. its results are indistinguishable from a human being, which I'll let you opine on that. As I say, it's a point of contention, but I can see why we've got to where we are today. So this comes to a question that I always get: what actually is AI? And the answer is a lot more simple than you think. So I'm going to take you all back to school, and I want you to remember the line of best fit. If you remember the line of best fit, great. What that was it was you drew a scatter chart. Now, I remember when I did this at school, what it was I had to go and measure people's heights and take their ages, and then we draw a scatter chart of people's heights versus ages. And then you get this roughly thing that goes in a rough line across this scatter chart. And then you get a ruler and you try and draw the line that went through as many of those points as possible. And then, so most of you remember the equation y equals mx plus or minus c, but we won't go to that. Well, that's AI. Now, people say, Jamie, that can't be AI. It must be more complicated than that. Well, today's AI is, but that is the simplest form of machine learning or AI that there is. Why? Well, you've got to think about how a computer typically learns. A computer typically learns through doing one thing. You basically program it. So you would say, right, if this transaction is over £50, then do this. If this box is blue on the screen, then this means this, so on and so forth. AI is different. AI is just like that line of best fit. I have given instead of giving those computer that explicit direction, I've given it some data and I've said learn from that data. So it's learned where to put the ruler and create that line of best fit. It's worked out the maths of that line of best fit, and it's using that maths to predict future values. And that's it. That's AI. Except today it's a lot more complicated than a line of best fit. So we talked about neural networks, but they work in a very, very similar way to what we've just described. They take data, they learn from that data, they work out the maths of that data, and then they apply to future values. And I mentioned earlier about a technique called backpropagation, where you can learn iteratively from the data that's out there. So how has ChatGPT learned? How has Claude learned? Right? Well, quite simple. They took a black box algorithm, think of it like an empty computer brain, an empty an empty version of a human brain on a computer, right? And what they said was they asked it a question. Let's make it up. Let's say, what is the capital city of France? And it came out with a completely random nonsense answer and said, you're wrong. You're wrong by this much. So we tried again, and they tried again, and they tried again, and tried again until it came up with the answer Paris. Fine, great. So, and then it learned the patterns from that. So then it gave it another question, and it got that wrong, and that wrong, and that wrong, and then it learned it. And then it learned what the right answer was. And then it kept going with all these different questions, millions upon billions of questions, until eventually it learned the patterns, not just in the answer, not just to say, right, well, what is the capital city of France? Well, I've seen that before. It's Paris. So the answer, please, Paris. That's not true. What it also did was it learned to reason and understand and infer from the question it was given. So let's say, for example, from answering all those questions, because it's learned all those patterns, let's say we ask it, what is the capital of Germany? And we've never given it the answer, Berlin. But it knows from answering all these questions, it knows that a capital city normally has a cathedral, sometimes the parliament's in it, sometimes lots of people, it's very culturally diverse, it's lots of it appear on the news, whatever those factors may be. And then it says, right. So you ask it, what is the capital of Paris? And then it guesses Berlin. And it's right. And it's right because the maths of it all learn all the patterns and the patterns on patterns and the patterns on patterns on patterns, so it can make educated guesses, just like you and me. I'm going to flip on a bit. So when we talk about these large language models and what they've learned, it's very easy to say, well, I've typed something in and I don't like the answer, therefore it's wrong. But my question to everybody on the call is today is, if you had a really junior member of staff, no experience. So think back to me when I joined the Audit Commission and I didn't know anything about journals or accounting or even turning up to work every day on time. If somebody had asked me a question that was really simple, I'd probably get the wrong answer. Why would AI be any different? It's not going to come up with the same answer every time because humans don't come out with the same answer any time. Now, the godfather of AI, Geoff Hinton, claims that the models that we see today are the best models of human brains that we have. They're not human brains, but they're the best models of human brains that we have. And therefore, when we try and get answers out of them, we should think about the human condition, how often we get it wrong, and cut AI the same slack. And I think if you do that and look through the examples that we do today, you'll realize that that works. So I often run this session in front of people, and I will often ask them, what is your first memory? And the last session I ran in Newcastle with an accounting firm, a girl put her hand up and then described her grandma's house very well, described what her grandma was wearing, and told me she was about 4 years old. And that's typical when I answer the question. Truth is, what's the chances of you remembering what happened when you were 4 years old? The answer is very, very, very slim. And especially to remember it in the detail that you do. So if I think about my first memory, I was at Flamingo Land in North Yorkshire. I was 3 years old. I was having a great time. Saw all the animals. I remember everything. Do I actually remember that? No. I remember it because my parents told me. Sadly, I just got out of hospital. I was a bit of a sick child. And they explained what had happened, and therefore in my mind, I now remember that. And this attendee at one of my courses had remembered that she has a picture of her grandma wearing exactly the same clothes and a picture of a house exactly as she remembers it. And what is the chances of that? The answer is 0. So what AI does is exactly what you or I do when we get asked a question that fills in the gaps. Except you and I have the skepticism to be able to say, I'm not sure that's right. AI hasn't quite got there yet. We call it hallucination in AI. In humans, we call it confabulation. But it's exactly the same thing. And Geoff Hinton did all of this. So he was the guy who came up with backpropagation. He was the team who won AlexNet. He was the team who basically let Google create the first large language model. And Geoff Hinton did all this because he wanted to create a model of the human brain. And his main bugbear is the fact that people don't equate it as a human brain. They hold it to a different standard. But if you do think of it like a human, you'll get the best out of it. Now, with that said, how do they actually work? So we've talked about it's learning from loads and loads of different questions. Now, it surprises people when I tell them when it learns from all these different questions that you've given it, that the people who create these models never expected it to do so well. It's like mixing all the ingredients in a cake, putting it in the oven, right? I've got this black box model, as I said before. It's empty. It's willing to be trained. It's like a cake. Put all the ingredients together, put in the oven. When the cake came out, it was delicious. It was beautiful. It was much better than they thought they could ever do. And these models were exactly the same. And today they are still learning why they do what they do. But what we know is quite shocking. So how do they work? Well, as a black box model, if I give it a picture of a dog and a cat, it will learn eventually from training, from giving it lots of pictures of dogs, lots of pictures of cat, what a picture of a dog and a cat is. And think about in this artificial brain, in your brain, you've got lots of neurons, brain cells, and I'm sure you've seen it on TV where you see they put the electrodes on people's brains and the sections light up when people are thinking about certain things or feeling certain things or reading certain things, yeah. And they can now do that with large language models in a similar way. And they find that different parts of the large language model do different things. So, for example, if I'm teaching it what a picture of a cat and a picture of a dog is, maybe the first layers, the first bits of the model will detect those simple features like edges, lines, and individual parts, and it'll come up with a probability to say, right, pointy ears, sticking up cat. Middle layers will combine some of this and say, right, bright red nose, pointy ears, more likely to be a cat. And then the deeper layers will start to have a look at the more detailed things, like the full structure, such as the overall face, the shape, and the distinguishing features like fur texture. And then it will come out with an overall probability to say, is this picture of a cat or is this the picture of a dog? And they've now done that. They've done the equivalent thing of watching the brain cells light up when they're working to see how things happen. Now, five years ago, before we started to tweak these things and make them work a little bit better, if you gave it a picture of a cat and a picture of a dog, fine, it can pick up what a picture, it can work out what a picture of a cat is to reasonable accuracy, a picture of a dog. But then if you gave it a picture of a rabbit, it wouldn't have a clue because it didn't know. Likewise, if I trained it on pictures of dogs, and as you can see in the picture on the left, if all the dogs had collars on, then actually it's going to equate a collar being associated with a dog. And that's bad. We call that bias because the data sets are biased, and we see that. We see that today. So that is one of the other big problems with models that exist today, is it's learned off human data, and humans are horrible, horrible people. We've gone through history murdering people and having wars and writing horrible things and doing terrible things like the slave trade, etc. And it's learned from all of the things that we've written down. Some of it you don't want to know. And we'll go on to that in a moment because I found something very, very interesting when I created a video for this presentation. So you've got to be careful of those biases because they exist. But it's not the AI's fault, it's our fault. It's learned from our data, it's learned who we are, and it's answering the questions to the best of its ability, right? So cut it some slack, please. That's what I'm going to say. Just before I go on, is there any questions? Let me stop sharing my screen and we can maybe come to any questions.
There are no questions yet.
No questions, good. Thank you. So let's move on to the prompt engineering masterclass, and let's give you some chances to have a try and have a play with the large language model of your choice. So I'm going to start with a scenario. I'm not going to start with a scenario, actually. I'm going to start with what are the available AI models available to you that you probably know and love today. So there's 4.0 from OpenAI. Anybody who uses ChatGPT free will come across this model as the good model that it has. It is probably the most robust and all-round model there is out there. It's annoying me right now because over time it's producing more summarized responses. It's putting those horrible little emojis in there, but it's actually getting more and more accurate over time. And I quite like OpenAI 4.0. That's the one that probably most of you are working with on a day-by-day basis. If you're using any of the Microsoft models through Copilot or your own Microsoft Azure model, for example, it's all based on this model 4.0. It's the jack of all trades model. Good at creating pictures. It's good at recording, transcribing voice. It's good at doing lots of different things. 4.0 is the ultimate go-to model. Reasoning though, so O3 is an O3 Pro now, or OpenAI's better models. They're reasoning models, so they can sit and they can start to think about whether the answer they're giving you is correct or not. They're now being typically used for agentic tool use. So what do I mean by agentic tool use? Well, it's typically something that is then a large language model that is engineered to do a task, which could be respond to an email, write a letter, whatever that might be, agents. It does top the benchmarks today. It is undoubtedly the best model out there, if I'm honest. It's suddenly got a lot cheaper because O3 Pro has come out. But if you want a good model that comes up with a reasonable answer every time, that is more than likely correct, O3 is your one. Claude is brilliant. Now, some of the benchmarks will put Claude, Anthropic's Claude over OpenAI 03. Personally, when I've used it, I found it creates a few more errors than O3, but what it is brilliant for is creating copy. So I write articles, I write training papers and training courses, and it is superb for that. It will take the outputs of O3, for example, or it will take my terribly formatted notes and scroll and format out them up really nice, and it reads really well as well. So Claude is very, very good at that. And if you're a computer programmer, it is exceptional at coding without a shadow of a doubt. Perplexity is one that we don't really come across very often, but it's getting used more and more and more. Think of it like an answer engine. It's like a research engine. So it's like a Google on steroids. So if you ask it a question, it will use a large language model. A lot of it's based on DeepSeek, but it's a local version it's a UK-based ring-fenced version of DeepSeek that allows it to do the research, come up with the answers. Once it's come up with those answers, it gives you all the links and where it's come up with those answers from. So I use it for fact checking quite a lot. If I want to know whether a piece of legislation or a new paper that's come out is factually accurate, Perplexity is great for that. So my biggest client at the moment, which is a professional services firm in the communication space, they use it a lot for making sure that their outputs are factually accurate and they get the right references and they can do the right level of research. Perplexity is great for that. And if you haven't used Perplexity or Claude, I fully recommend giving them a go. But going back to the point of today's talk, treat them as people, right? Now, if Claude was a person, if OpenAI was a person, if Perplexity was a person, if O3 was a person, right, in your team, would you expect everybody in your team to be very good at every task? No. Some tools are better than other tools, just like some people are better than other people. And if I'm going to give a job to somebody like somebody in my team, I'm going to explain the answer. I'm going to explain what I want and why I want it to them. So why would a large language model be any different? And when I was at Grant Thornton, that's what we used to say to everybody. Quite simple. Think of a large language model. Think of these as AIs as incredibly bright graduates that have come into the business. They can do a brilliant job of whatever you give them. Sometimes they make mistakes. And if you don't tell them exactly what you want, don't be surprised if you don't get the right answer. And that helps. And that's how you'd help somebody new at work, isn't it? You'd be really clear on what you tell them. You'd be really clear on what you give them. You'd be very clear on your expectations that you want out of it. So do the same with large language models, and that'll make a huge difference. And I'm going to show you how to do that today. Now, I mentioned earlier in this talk about bias. So I asked OpenAI to create me a video of somebody junior at work being coached by somebody more senior. Guess what? The middle-aged old white man is the more senior one. There's a surprise. So how has it done that? Well, guess what? It's learned from all our literature. It's learned from everything that we've written down, and it's figured that out for itself. That's not good, is it? It's a shocking indictment of the way that our world is. So yes, there's bias in action in this one video that I've created for you. So I'm going to give you a quick scenario before you pull your large language models out of choice. You're in a lift with the finance director. Oh no. Yesterday, a single AP clerk altered 37 supplier master file records and created 14 one-time vendors just before the month end. And there was no corresponding approval tickets. So, how did they circumvent this? Can you prepare a briefing for the Finance and Risk Committee tomorrow at 9 a.m.? Right, it's amazing. The log show there's no corresponding approval tickets. That's a level of control that sometimes I don't often see either. But let's just run with it, right? That's the scenario. That's what we're going to go through today. So you're the senior accountant on the job and you're thinking, oh no, I've got to produce this deck. So actually, go back. If you are in front of a large language model, can you ask it to prepare a briefing for the Finance and Risk Committee tomorrow at 9 a.m, please? And while everybody is doing that, let me tell you how you do it properly, because it would be nice to compare. I am a large language model, or I am a junior person in your team. I am a very, very clever person. I've been at university. I've got all this knowledge. But because I've got all this knowledge, I don't really know how to apply it properly, and I need to know what you want. So when I'm writing a prompt, I need to do three things. I need to give it context. I need to give it clarity, and I need to give it constraints. Right? Otherwise, I'll get all that emoji rubbish again. So, context. I've got to tell it exactly what the specific task objective is. So a well-crafted prompt may consider the scenario. So tell it the scenario. Tell it, you are a senior management accountant. Your boss you got stuck in a lift with your boss. He told you something that you didn't want to know, which was blah, 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 blah. So they understand it all. This is a company where they've implemented the controls, but the last audit report said that the controls weren't operating effectively, and it looks like it's happened again. Give it the context. Now, if you waffle on to a junior member of staff, they're going to lose you. They need simple instructions. So you've given it the context, but you've got to make sure that it's clear. So try not to waffle on for too long. Make sure they're not overly vague and broad questions. Just make sure that the context and the task that you've given it is really clear to do too. And then finally give it some constraints, right? So as I said before, I get sick of those little dashes, those little M dashes, and I get sick of it writing things in American English, and I get sick of it putting things in bullets, and I get sick of those stupid little emojis that it puts on the front of everything, because it makes me feel 12. So tell it, don't give it any of those stuff. Tell it, I want this in prose. Tell it, I want this in less than 150 words, whatever it might be. Tell it how you want the outputs to be constrained, right? If you give it context, you give it clarity, you give it constraints, you'll get a much better answer. Should we give it a go? Okay. So here's one I prepared earlier. Okay. So instead of asking it, quite simple, to produce a presentation for the Audit and Risk Committee tomorrow, I've given it context here. You can see that on my screen. I'm giving it clarity, and I've given it the constraints. I've told it basically, I've told it the scenario. I've told it what's gone wrong. I've told it how I want it to produce the outputs, and I've given it its constraints as well. I've told it what it can, how it must present the results. Let's see how it does. Oh, we'll do something different as well. I have the pleasure of being able to ask two models to do this. So let's ask GPT 4.1 Nano to do it. And let's ask Claude Haiku to do it as well. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. So you can see I've asked two different models to be able to do this. I've got two reasonable sets of results here. Now, I haven't looked at these in any detail. See what you think. You can look at them now, see which one you prefer. But that, again, that's no different to going out and working with a member of staff. If you've got a big team, and one of the teams I used to have, there was always people that I knew would do very good at specific jobs, and I'd give that job to them, right? So you might find, for example, that Claude is better at certain things than ChatGPT. You may find that Perplexity is better at certain things than ChatGPT. So you'll give the right question to the right tool for the right job, right? So have a look at them. The good thing is, because I've given it that context clarity constraints, it's given me exactly what I want in both cases. It's given me 2 slides. The accounting impact, the immediate actions, that's exactly what I wanted. It's given me slightly different actions here, but they both seem reasonable. And actually, preparing this deck, this is again no different going out and asking 2 people, what should I put in this deck? What do the finance and audit committee want to know? Well, actually, I can cut and stick the bits that I think are most relevant and put in the deck. Sometimes asking more than 1 people is the right thing to do. That makes sense to everyone, right? Good. So there you go. If you do context clarity constraints, and if that's the only thing you take away from today's session, you'll do phenomenally well. Your prompts will improve and you'll get much more reliable outcomes. But there's so many more little tips and tricks and techniques that you can do. Prompt engineering is something that will take you weeks to learn if you want to do it properly. You can use, for example, domain specific terms, and I'm not going to do these in order, and we're going to come on to those in a minute. So domain specific terms, in fact, this is the only thing that differs from what I've just told you. When you say think of it as a junior member of staff, use more complicated language with it, because it's reading every word that you put in. And if you're using complicated language, it realizes that this is a complicated accounting problem, and therefore I need to give it a complicated accounting problem answer. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I can ask it to verify outputs. So I was standing at a conference in Warsaw 2 weeks ago, and I got 5 questions that came through on was a slide or whatever it was, and it was ChatGPT is always wrong. How can I improve the accuracy of it? And the answer to that is quite simple again. Ask it to verify its outputs. Ask it to do a QA itself. So there's nothing stopping you saying, give me an output, and then saying, can you check that you're right? Can you check that you've answered my question properly and independently check that the answer is correct? Much more likely to pick up hallucinations, right? So always have that as the final line in your prompt. Can you double check the answer that you've given me, please? Use chain of thought prompting. So if anybody's used the reasoning model, you can see the rationale, or you're meant to be able to see the rationale, although the most recent research papers are saying otherwise. They're now saying that it may be lying to you, but that's outside of the scope of this session. You can see, take it on face value, you can see the rationale and for why it's coming up with the answer that it does. So if you ever use for 03, for example, or DeepSeek, you'll start to see, wait, and it was the 3rd Tuesday in the month, so this means the user must mean this, and so on and so forth. You can force that to happen, right? So you can force it, and if you want it to think through a problem in a specific way, tell it to think through a problem in a specific way. Open this file, read the first 3 lines, tell me what is in the first 3 lines, summarize it in 2 words, please, so on and so forth. If you just give it a vague prompt again, it's not likely to get it right. It's much more likely to get it right, just like a graduate would, if you actually tell it step by step what you want it to do. And then use prompt templates. Now, this is probably the key one for efficiency in any organization. So last 10 years, I've been flogging robotic process automation for people, right? There's loads of great tools that do this for you. Actually, I think this is probably, with a small amount of technical skilling through courses like this one, you can get the most out of it. So actually, I can, if I have to produce an audit committee pack every month, I can have a master prompt that's sat there where I just fill in the blanks. And I say, because it produces that prompt, it produces that pack exactly the way that I want it to produce it. I just change the numbers at the top and tell it what I want to put in, and then press play, and off it all pops, and I get everything that I want. And I'll show you how to do that in a moment. So there are 4 additional key techniques that tie into those context clarity constraints that will help you improve your prompts. So let's show you a prompt template in action. There we go. Promise you I'll get it right. So here's a prompt template. So here's the scenario. I want to create an email. I've gone to this meeting and I got a bit of a kicking off the Audit and Risk Committee. And the Audit and Risk Committee have said, I want an email off you every month to confirm the status of the controls. I think, oh, every month I've got to send them an email. Right, I don't want to do that. That's going to take me half a day because I'm going to panic over it. So why don't I create a prompt template? And that's really simple. So all I do is I create a prompt where I put all the different variables at the top. And if anybody's written code, you'll understand what this looks like. It is just like writing code, but in English. So I put all the different things that have changed this month, the number of supplier changes, the balance on the AP ledger, the number of one-time vendors that have been approved, so on and so on and so forth. And then I've got my prompt below that tells me, gives it the context, the clarity, and the constraints again. So it tells it how to structure the email, tells it what to put in there. And then, as I've said before, it gives you the verification. So when finished, self-check, make sure that you've done it right. Okay. Now, in this, I meant to add some documents, but I'm not adding documents this time. So it's going to make some stuff up. But let's give it a run. Well, let's run it there. There you go. And that's a really nice, really nice email format, isn't it? That I can start to be able to play with and use and tweak the way that I want it to do. So it's told me exactly what I need to know. And it's a really nice, simple email so I can send every month. Brilliant, isn't it? Let's regenerate that. But again, let's try it with two different models. There you go. So again, it's done a pretty good, both Claude and ChatGPT have done a pretty good job there at creating some pretty good outputs. Have a look at it, see which one you think you prefer, and pick your tool of choice, pick your staff member of choice. And I'd be very surprised to hear that I work with an organization that gave all their bots, all their GPTs names, and actually gave them a performance appraisal at the year end. Now, you know, that sounds crazy. Actually, it worked. It made it feel more human for people. It actually got really good feedback, but I'm not sure I'd go that far. I quite like that idea. Right, so prompt templates is something that we've done. Using domain-specific terms, as I said, is the one thing that you can do as well that probably breaches what I've said before around making it giving clear instructions to a junior member of staff, because you'd explain things to a junior member of staff without using big words. If you use big words, it understands more, a little bit more about the context that it's in. Ooh, if I'm using lots of big account words, I must be talking to an accountant, so let's give me an accountant type answer. Chain of thought prompting we've been through as well. So get it to tell me step by step exactly what I want it to do. So let's show that. So I want my model to think step by step. I am going to give it some things. I'm going to give it the AP files, and I'm going to say I've got 3 unauthorized supplier master edits, 11 duplicate invoice exceptions, and 95 unmatched lines. And for each exception type, I wanted to go through I wanted to tell me the most plausible root cause, because I've got to investigate this. So maybe I'll run this a little bit before I send my email to the monthly control email to the committee. And that's the important thing, because some of the models that you use will have memory. So consider any previous knowledge you may have. Now, again, this hasn't got memory because it's not, you've got all your enterprise data in. So it won't come up with anything, but then I'll come up with some actions, and then actually I'm going to put some constraints there, put it under the heading root cause and fixes. Let's go. And again, it's done pretty much what I wanted it to do. Root cause and fixes, these sound quite reasonable to me, so I quite like that. Really like the answers, seem to work for me, so pretty much the same thing. So that's good, happy with that. And as we said before as well, verification prompts, ask it to make sure it's got the right answers. Ask it to double check anything. There is nothing wrong with that. Now, some people say, should I do that in a subsequent prompt? Up to you. Sometimes it's a bit more transparent to see, you can see the adjustments that it's made if you do it in a subsequent prompt. So what I mean by subsequent prompt is you get to ask it a question, and then afterwards you get to check that it's right in a separate prompt. Then you can see the adjustments that it's made. But if you just ask it to do it, you probably should come out all in the same prompt. You probably should come out with the right answer. And that's no different to asking, say, a junior member of staff to say, check it what you made first before you give it to me, because you made a mistake last time and I don't want to see the same ones. Finally, document context. So document context is probably the biggest thing that can result in more accurate prompt outputs that you could do. So as we said, think of ChatGPT, think of these models as an electronic brain, right? It remembers so much stuff explicitly. We know that. Then it reasons and makes up the rest. We call that grokking. I don't want it to make anything up, though. I don't want it to figure it out and guess. I want it to come up with the right answer. So what do? Well, I give it the source text to find its answer from. Makes sense, doesn't it? If I'm a junior member of staff, you know, I might turn around and say, tell me about IFRS 16, right? Well, I did it in my exam. I'm not too sure. I can't remember. You know, there's the document. There's the brief. Read it and tell me the answer. I'm going to get a much better answer, aren't I? So actually, by giving it the documents and by being able to say, find me the answer in there, you're going to get much more chance of getting the right answer. And to be honest, that's probably where these large language models have really got their home over the next 3 to 5 year horizon, while the model vendors build the trust and improve their accuracy to get away from the hallucination problems that they've got. Is by giving it documents. It's pretty good at reading that and summarizing that. Let's just do that in future. So as I said before, I started off in the Audit Commission as an external auditor. I hated external audit. I'm really sorry, guys. If anybody's an external audit on here, I much prefer internal audit. But internal audit, it's a lot easier, I'm honest. It's a lot more fun as well. It's a lot easier though. Sorry. If you're an internal auditor though, you've got loads of things to do that are standard across multiple different engagements. I've got to create terms of reference for each audit. Now, if I'm going to create terms of reference for each audit, for example, I'm going to have to go and typically find an old terms of reference and then tweak it and change it, and then have a conversation with about 10 people to see what the scope should be, and maybe look at the risk universe, etc., and figure it all out. Why can't I just create a prompt? Why can't I create that prompt template and give it a load of documentation so I can give it my internal audit methodology? I can give it, my risk taxonomy. I can give it some key pertinent audit scope and information. Maybe some emails with my boss. It says I want the audit to be based on this, 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 and this, and this. I want to cover this, 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 and this. If I give it all of that and put it in a prompt template, press play, I can create terms of reference like that, and I can create it for any audit. Because if I create a prompt template, I only have to change the documents and I only have to change the data at the top. And that bottom bit that's creating the audit terms of reference, I can tweak, I can change over time, because you've already seen that they're quite reliable once you give it those constraints of creating the right formatted outputs that you want. But over time, I can tweak it to make sure that it's right. So why don't we just do that? Show you an example. So obviously I haven't added any documents here, so we know it's going to make stuff up this time. For the just to show you what it creates, right? So this is the prompt that you saw before. I've got all the different documents I'm meant to have added above. I've got the context, clarity, constraints, and then verification at the end. Oh, quite like this. It's produced a table. Looks quite reasonable. Kind of prefer the Claude response there. They've got a background and rationale that reads right. They're slightly different outputs, but I like it. You know, maybe it could be for me, the Claude, for example. Claude is my assistant that creates my terms of reference because I prefer it, right? And I use ChatGPT, GPT for something else, right? It's the same as getting somebody in your team to produce a document because they're the best person for the job. And that's it in terms of the basics of prompt engineering. Now, there are courses, and I run courses that will take this into a lot more detail. But to be fair, if you just remember 3 things from today: context, clarity, constraints, the quality of your outputs from your prompts will be much better. It'd be remiss of me as an auditor not to say a couple of things around the risks of AI. It does make stuff up, but cut it some slack, just like you and me do. Use AI to save time, but never shortcut quality. We're already seeing people save time by using AI, but then not checking that it's right. Goes out in your name. You know, make sure that you check the outputs. Use it responsibly. So don't go putting private data into public ChatGPT. There's organisations that I work with that do that. Us as regulated people, we should never do that. From an audit perspective, I expect to see over time, as this becomes more and more built into what we do. If I was creating an audit work paper, Jamie did this, Jamie did that, Jamie did the other, Jamie did predictive analytical rules, blah, 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 blah. Jamie used Claude. Write down what you use, record the prompt that you use, for example. And then watch for that bias and fairness, because it trips you up, right? It will trip you up. It will produce that video of the middle-aged white man tutoring the younger lady, biased, because we're biased. Cut it some slack again, but we're biased as humans. So, as I say, context, clarity, constraints, if you can just remember those 3 and use those 3, promise you'll be a massive difference to the quality of your prompts. Treat your prompts like code. The worst thing that you could do if you get a good response out of a prompt, is throw it away. Save it somewhere. Even if you just do what I do, you can save it in a notebook, or you can just save it in your drafts. I save everything in my drafts folder of my emails. It's shocking, really, but I do. So then it's like my filing cabinet and go and find it, and I go, oh, I'll use that one again. You know, treat your prompts like code. Keep them if they work. Tweak them. Have a library of them, and you'll get the best out of it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Jamie. We have some questions. I think the highly voted question at the moment is that organizations seem to be restricting the use of AI to Microsoft Copilot.
Yeah.
And the question is, how can they maximize this version of Copilot to help with sort of finance and reporting tasks?
So I've had the same allergic reaction that a lot of people have had to Copilot, and it's simple psychology, right? You type something in to ChatGPT 03, and then you type the same question into Copilot, and the answer's not as good, and therefore I think, oh, I don't want to use it. Forget ChatGPT. If that's all you've got, make the best of it. Make the best of it. And think of it like a junior member of staff again, right? If at the first you don't succeed, try again. Explain it a different way. Write your prompt differently. Experiment with different prompts to see how you can get the output. Maybe I need to be more explicit in what I tell it. Maybe I need to use RAG. Maybe I need to give it the document to get the answer. Play with it. Get it right. Because you will get the answer that you want. It won't be as fast. It won't be as easy, maybe, as some of the better models out there, but you'll get the answer that you want. Now, I do think Microsoft will win out in the tech war, because the barrier to leaving Microsoft in any organization, for lots of reasons, is just far too high. I'd encourage anybody to look at Copilot Studio. And hopefully your IT departments will allow you to use it. If you use Copilot Studio, It allows you to create those agents. It allows you to create these bots that, you know, if you need a terms of reference generator, or if you need a engagement letter generator, if you need a monthly report pack generator, you can create them through Copilot Studio. And they're pretty good. So there's lots there, but I guess what I would say in using Copilot is take that allergic reaction away from it, accept that it's not going to be quite as good, but it's like a car, right? You're not going to be driving around in that Ferrari, you're going to be driving around in that Kia.
Yeah.
But it's fine. It will get you there. You know, you might just have to put up with the bumpier ride a bit more.
Okay, we probably can take one more question. I'll take the most popular one before we have to close, as we're now 5 minutes over. Do you think it's worrying that it will be commonly accepted in workplaces to use AI tools to create work, structured emails, etc.? What should we be paying attention to, if you like, it just being that professional skepticism, I guess, in dealing with people's AI generated work?
It doesn't worry me, but it will worry a lot of people, and I understand why. I think back to when I started the Audit Commission, it was quite easy then to think that my job was just filling in teammate. Because it was like, Jamie, you got to do all these tests. Well, I've just got to read some stuff and fill in this box. Read some stuff and fill in this box. Have a look at what we did last year, fill in the box. And therefore, today, this very much feels the same. Actually, I've just got to write a prompt, put it in the ChatGPT, and produce the email for me, and I'll just cut and stick it, and I won't use my brain, and I'll put it in there, and it'll go. And that's the wrong answer. The right answer is to say, actually, I am responsible for the output. And again, think of it like a junior member of staff. You know, if you're a manager in an accountant team, for example, you'd be very foolish to be able to take the work of a graduate and just say, right, I'm going to send this to the FD or the FC now, but off we go. You're going to check it. You're going to make sure that it's right. It's very tempting not to. I get that. But, you know, you're responsible for the output. And if you do that, then hopefully it'll make you become faster and faster, and you'll be able to do more in your job every day. And we'll see where the world goes, to be honest. It's amazing, though. I've done automation for a long time now, and work always fills the time available. So the amount of spreadsheets over the years that I've got rid of, and AP functions that I've automated, and then you go back a year later and it's like, yeah, my team is still busy, but the thing they're still crazy busy, but everything that you do is automated. It's brilliant. Yeah, well, they were busy before, they're busy now, so come on, what's the difference? I think there'll be plenty of work. I hope, touch wood, there's plenty of work to go around, and there's not big job losses at the end of this. But yeah, anybody would be foolish not to treat the outputs as and rubber stamp them. You know, treat the outputs as something they've got to review and rubber stamp them before they go out.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Just quickly to share with everyone else that is still online, we've got part 2 of our AI mini series happening tomorrow. It's being hosted by our partners at ICAEW, and it's just taking this a step further. So Jamie mentioned moving from just templates to actually having agents do the work for you, and this is sort of starting to explore the world of AI agents. So if you're interested in digging a little bit deeper, then please do feel free to sign on to that session. You can sign on directly on ICAEW's website and use the code SIPFA15 to get in for free, because otherwise you would be charged for it. So thank you all so very much for joining us. Hopefully we'll see some of you at PF Live later in the month. Otherwise, goodbye and have a good rest of the day.